Hello everyone, I'm Anne, the Annevangelical Catholic here, to discuss with you something about my personal life, something about that's relevant to a lot of people, especially these days, no doubt. It's like suffering loss of control, loss of something, not necessarily of a person, maybe in some way relatable, but obviously losing a loved one is different than losing your home. I mean, I mentioned it before last year, but this is kind of like retrospective. This is also a special thing to take note of is people's emotions and how they've been changing, how they've been feeling, the presence of what might be referred to as negative emotions, and the problem with the persistence of certain emotions like anger, sadness, depression, etc. That I am not a medical professional. I'm just here to share my personal story about my experience in the hopes that maybe it will help other people get through this, because I felt really like I was being kind of dragged at certain moments during the loss of my home. And it was like the 5 stages of grief that you hear so many times, 5 stages of grief, and that grief is like a normal human process, although unfortunately some people might get stuck in certain stages and that could be unhealthy. But for the most part, I think it's like healthy and normal to go through these different stages. The problem is when people get stuck, and that's what I encourage and advise people to do, is to seek medical professional help and the help of a licensed professional, and not just settle for this. But it's good to stay in touch with people, to stay in communication with people, and that's very important. And from my experience, again, not to be afraid to seek out help. And again, there's a lot of people I know struggling, and their experiences are very varied. Depending on their state of life. Like, people are continuing to be born and die during this time of the coronavirus pandemic, and I felt like it was time. Like, eventually I wanted to share this, and I've been praying and thinking about it for a long time. So I wanted to start, of course, from the beginning about how just terrifying it is to experience, like, to hear the alarm, and I'm right away in the denial. I was like, hopefully it's not that bad. You don't want it to be very bad. You're like praying like this is something you hope never happens. And something I never hoped happened was like the alarm going off, the smoke detector going off, and then there being a fire, and like I didn't know what to do to take out the fire, in the hopes that I would stop it before it got too serious. And it was fortunately like the point where it's like there's nothing I can do to help, unfortunately, at this point. I just gotta call 911, which is probably the best move, regardless. If there was like a small kitchen fire, but unfortunately it was very big and very scary just to look at the flames and to actually be able to feel the heat of it. It's like, it was very hard to mention that and to anyone. It's like, this is frightening that that you could feel the heat from a yard away for sure. And it was like a little bit further than that, but definitely like at least a yard away. You could feel the intensity of the heat, and you could see the flames, and it was terrifying in that moment. And it's hard to think about even now, even though it's thankfully over and done with. But a long time throughout it, there was this denial about kind of like how serious it was to me. And it's like, well, nobody's physically hurt, thank goodness. Like, I did try to focus on the positive, but then there's the reality that something was lost, and that is frightening to experience something like that, to see something like this force of nature causing this destruction. And it was serious. It wasn't like the most serious of fires or acts of destruction, but it was still very serious. And thankfully the fire department came right away, and the fire was taken out. But unfortunately the smoke, and because they had to like make a hole in the wall to make sure to inspect any fire damage, yeah, we couldn't stay, and we had to move to a hotel and have to deal with all that of having to kind of move our home. And it was just a lengthy process. But that day I was like upset, but trying to stay focused, stay positive. And I just didn't want to have to deal with it and decide, I thought at first I'd be okay if I just went about my day. But I'm like breaking down. I ended up breaking down in tears, like on my way to work. And I thought, maybe if I push myself to go through this about about this normally. I think it's a common temptation that people have is just, to act like this is just a normal day. Maybe you will believe it's normal and you'll be fine, psychologically and physically. And it's like, I had my cry. Can I move on now? Kind of not wanting to process the whole thing, not even really being able to fully process everything that's going on, or just being panicked at first, trying to get in touch with my mom, who wasn't at home at the time and was in charge of it all. Yeah, it's like kind of like personal, like it impacted me and my whole family, at immediate family at the same time. And to think about how, well, I know how it impacted me, and I feel like it was a different experience for me, just a little bit, even though we were like all in this together, because we all lost our home. But some of us saw the flames, some of us didn't, some of us had to rush out of the house, and some of us didn't. Some of us had to find out after the fact that the house was burned, and that, oh, by the way, the family is okay, trying to get in touch, say, we're okay physically, but the house has been burnt. We got out, but still there was some damage. Still, our lives are gonna have to change. And I just tried to go through my day, and I didn't know how to really deal with these emotions. It's like something like this never really happened before, and it is unfortunate when life surprises you in this way and terrifies you, frankly, in this way. And kind of try to go back into the house, get my things that I'm gonna need for the hotel, because we couldn't stay at home, but also get ready for work and try to go about things normally, but then realizing that it's not entirely normal on the inside. It's like physically I'm okay for work, but emotionally, mentally, like there's a need for an outlet. But it's like not sure at the time how to deal with this. Although, again, like there's stages that I went through, the stages of grief, and this is where it started with the denial of, like, it wasn't that big of a deal, and it was just the house, it's not gonna last forever, and we'll go back to normal, and this is like the new normal and such. And yeah, I was grateful that nobody was hurt, but it was more kind of like an emotional impact and loss of control. So of course, like, the 5 stages of grief kind of covers, went from denial to anger, and I was like angry about how life was, just angry without any really full understanding and sense, like why I was angry. It's like I got good food and sleep, I have the basic needs, but I'm still like upset because of the hurt that this whole thing caused, the shock of the fire, the having to relocate, having a new routine, although I was able to adjust to that, and like there's pros and cons, but this anger doesn't make full sense, except I know the anger is kind of like caused by the fact that I'm grieving and have experienced this fire, but I kind of like want it to be over with, so I'm angry at myself, and like the anger continues, like what is even happening? So I remember having these feelings of anger and just bringing them to God and praying and just trying to pray, feeling frustrated, tempted to cry, screamed into a pillow once. Like maybe this will help, but like maybe a second it did, and then I felt kind of the same, and then just tired enough that it didn't matter anymore, and it's like it came to pass, I suppose, is one way to say it. But then there's the bargaining, and I thought like that's the one that I felt the least, I guess. But I was like, well, next time, if there is a next time, like hopefully not. But if something, it's like, why make everyone suffer? Like, I know we have to suffer as Catholics. We believe in like redemptive suffering. We have to suffer in order to be transformed by our sins. Sometimes suffering helps us grow as people, but like if you're gonna bring a good thing out of the suffering, like you have to make it so that we all suffer so much, and couldn't have been just me who suffered kind of thing. And like in hindsight, maybe it doesn't make total sense. Like but is my way of bargaining, I suppose. Like maybe if I suffer, this will somehow like avoid any future suffering for everyone else. Like if I have to suffer, like let it be that I suffer, but why make other people suffer? Next time just make it so that I just suffer and things like that. And in hindsight I was like, well, I've got to let whatever is meant to be, even if everyone has to suffer together, even though I don't want that. I don't want suffering for myself. I don't want suffering for my whole family especially. But if I've got to trust that something good is coming out of this, and even though I don't like the terms and conditions of it, like how everyone has to suffer, it's the reality of life, and that something good is going to be brought out of it. So my prayer changed to be like, you know what, let's start bargaining about who's going to be made to suffer so that other people will suffer less. Let's just agree that you let whoever you want to suffer, and in turn, I'm going to trust you, God, that you will bring some good out of this, and to pray that you give us strength to make it through this time of trial.